This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We're coming to you through the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and can also be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring something evil. Since the beginning of recorded history, evil has always been among us. It has many faces and many names, but is impossible to accurately identify. From the Christian devil to ghouls and vampires, we've given it archetypal identification in an attempt to recognize it. We never really see evil, but only its effect in our world. Every culture has exerted much effort to eradicate it, yet evil remains as strong as ever. How can this be? Like all things, evil is a frequency that can exist outside and within us. Yet it can only express through us. Ironically, the more we deny it, the more we become it. You might say, "Not me, I'm good." My friends, we are all a mixed bag. Denial of our capacity to carry evil blinds us to the very places that support its frequency within our psyche. We all know life exists within a very narrow bandwidth of the acid-base scale. When things are too acidic, they burn us. Conversely, extreme base can do the same. If we consider evil to be acid and good to be base, we can understand it's not about abolishing one in favor of the other, but rather a question of balance. I believe this is why the most horrific acts are done in the name of good. How many religious wars have there been over the ages, both sides firmly believing they're good and projecting the bad onto the other? In our guilt-based cultures, we're taught to point the finger when anything undesirable shows up. Lord knows no one wants to be caught holding the steaming pile at the end of the blame game. The unfortunate result of the guilt shuffle is that in an attempt to be found blameless, we deny any part of ourselves even remotely resembling what has been judged as bad. Anything shoved into denial is no longer under control and is thus left to act out unchecked. Soon we find ourselves acting in uncharacteristic ways. These behaviors must also be shoved firmly into denial. As this continues, our denials become so overwhelming and toxic, they're increasingly difficult to keep under wraps. Taking this to its natural conclusion, we realize every serial killer feels perfectly justified in their actions. They're not the bad ones. Their victim deserved it, for whatever reason their delusional minds conjure. The fact is, the killer has projected his or her denials onto the victim and judged them to be the source. The killer then feels perfectly justified in murdering their victim. In effect, they're trying to kill a part of themselves. When their denials remain rather than face their actions or their denials, they're forced to find another victim. If instead we can embrace our perceived failings, own them, and transmute them, we can restore balance. We cannot hope to transmute our failings if we don't recognize and accept them as a part of ourselves. On a larger scale, most cultures have raised their children with the guilt-shame protocol. It's so pervasive, most of us don't even recognize it. It has produced a collective denial so toxic the entire cultures are, in effect, as mad as a serial killer. The evidence is everywhere, from shame, blame, projection in politics to terrorism. When one wakes up, steps back, and takes an objective look, it's as if the entire world has gone mad. What animal perpetrates genocide or fouls its own food, water, and bed? Evil cannot persist in the face of balanced frequency of love. Yes, evil is among us. Until we can embrace it where it resides within, we can never love ourselves or each other. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Masterful advice from the Master. In order to follow that advice, we must first accept and love ourselves as we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Our guest this hour, Paul Levy, is the author of Madness of George W. Bush, a reflection of our collective psychoses, Awakening Darkness, When Evil Becomes Your Father, and Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil. After this commercial break, I'll introduce Paul, and together we'll delve into the world of collective psychosis, evil, and the breaking of curses. Should be hair-raising, so don't go away. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net.
This is Kevin Randall. For nearly 30 years, I have been investigating the case of the Roswell UFO. I have interviewed hundreds of people and stood on the crash site. Now in Roswell in the 21st century, I have reviewed dozens of hours of audio and videotaped interviews, examined hundreds of files that relate to the crash, and have returned to Roswell in an attempt to put all that information into the proper perspective. For the first time in Roswell in the 21st century, I have made a dispassionate reevaluation of all that material and provide a new look at what happened. This is a book that clears away all the clutter that has hidden the truth for so long, strips away the various lies that surround the case, exposes the Air Force attempts at cover-up, and found a core of solid information that tells us all where the case stands today. Roswell in the 21st century will be available in just a few weeks. For more information, please visit my website at www.kevinrandall.blogspot.com.
Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at www.drgibbswilliams.com.
Shamanism is recognized as a method to access the quantum level. Mastery of shamanic skills puts spiritual information and healing power into your hands. Path Home Shamanic Art School, a bonded Colorado certified occupational school, has met rigorous state standards ensuring its director and instructors have the qualifications to teach the shamanic arts. Path Home offers its certification program in blocks of study. Block 1, a 5-day intensive, will be held in the beautiful mountain town of Coaldale, Colorado, October 13th through 18th. Registration deadline is September 12th. Experience journey trance, power animals, helping spirits, sacred space, and life purpose. Come discover your power. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, in the magical world of shamanism. Call 303-775-3431 or visit findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Paul Levy. His latest book, Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil. Paul's a pioneer in the field of spiritual emergence. He's been facilitating groups since 1993 to help others awaken from the collective dream. A Tibetan Buddhist practitioner for more than 30 years, he studied with some of the greatest spiritual masters of Tibet and Burma. Paul's website is www.awakeningtothedream.com. Paul, thank you for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I really want to thank you for inviting me.
It should be fun. For those of us, which would be most of us, unfamiliar with the term, what is a Wetiko?
Well, it's an indigenous term that the Native Americans coined, and it connotes the spirit of evil, and it's a collective psychosis, and you can call it this cannibal sickness, and the origin of it is in the psyche. So we're all afflicted with it. It pervades the collective unconscious, and one can think of it as sort of like this psychospiritual dis-ease of the soul, or like this virus of the mind that, because its origin and its source and the arena through which it operates is the psyche, we then become compelled to act it out unconsciously, and simultaneously it hides itself from being seen. Okay, so it actually will work through the blind spots of our unconscious and compel us to do its bidding. And, because it's being acted out through our blind spots, we have no idea that we've then been taken over to become an instrument for something to incarnate into the third dimensional world. So that's a real simple explanation. Of course, I've written a whole book about it. And, so anyways, why don't I just stop there for now?
Okay. Well, many Native traditions that I've studied consider us to be the inside-out society, in that we put ourselves first rather than the tribe or the earth itself, and in so doing, become parasitic. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, well, the thing is, the thing about Wetiko, so it works through the actual, we all project, so it works through the projective tendencies of our mind in such a way that we then, whatever we perceive in the world, we then think that it objectively exists separate from us. And then we react to that seemingly objective cosmos. But the other part of that process is that if we then are actually thinking that the world exists as an object out there separate from us, in a reciprocal, like in that moment, we've also conjured ourselves up to be subject to that world that's separate from that world. Well, one could say, well, that's the sense of ego, but that's not who we are. But the point is, our experience of the objective cosmos and the subjective inner experience of who we are, they in a reciprocal co-arising way, they're simultaneously arising, and that's the illusion. So then it becomes self-perpetuating. And as soon as we see things in that way, as soon as we actually experience the world as being objective, we then dream ourselves up to be subjective, and then that self-reinforces, and it becomes a self-perpetuating feedback loop. And in a sense, so what Wetiko does, it actually plugs into the genius, to our intrinsic capability of dreaming up our experience of our world, and it turns us against it. It turns that capability in ourselves, in this way that it will turn against ourselves in such a way that we imprison ourselves through our own creative genius. Okay. So that's right. So that's really a very simple explanation of Wetiko. But the point is that encoded in that process is our creative power. And what I'm trying to point at is, when you see through that process, you actually begin to connect with who you are, and you actually begin to connect with the empowered part of ourselves that can actually, transform the whole world, really. So that's what it's about.
Okay, let me see if I've got this right. So
Okay.
basically, we're creating a world because we're creators, but then we're becoming victim to it. And then we polarize ourselves against what we see as victimizing us, which takes us effectively out of the ability to be creators and puts Wetiko in that position.
Right. That's a beautiful way of describing it. And actually, I want to just commend you in your introduction that I was listening to. I was just like, wow, that's such a beautiful articulation of Wetiko in your own words. And yeah, but what you just said is exactly it, in that. And like one way to think about that is that if you're in this night dream and if you hold a particular point of view in that night dream, well, what is the night dream? But it's a reflection of your own mind. So if you're holding a point of view that night dream, that it's real and solid and objective, then the night dream has no choice but to supply all the evidence confirming your perspective. So then, of course, now you have all the proof that you need that, how I'm seeing things is true. So you become even more entrenched in that viewpoint of seeing the dream as objective. And, that's the feedback loop. But of course, what the implication of that is that encoded in that experience is that if you see the nature of your situation, i.e. that you're dreaming, that the actual, this whatever the environment is actually your own mind, all of a sudden that's to begin to wake up and begin to tap into our empowered, that part of us that is empowered, and is in that interfaces with the creative spirit.
So basically, we perceive reality through our five senses, and then in the landscape of our imagination, paint what we consider to be reality. And the difference there would be to drop into the frequency and shift it in order to create the reality we want or align with a portion of reality that is best advantageous to us. Is that involved here?
Yeah, well, one way of understanding it, when I say, because one of the ways of seeing Wetiko, because it works through it works through the part of us that has these blind spots, and it's an actual psychic form of blindness. And it's a form of being blind that we don't even know we're blind, but on the contrary, we think we're seeing clearly. And so when I say that the way to see it is to see, this is some sort of a dream, well, what is a dream? It's an ink blot. It's a projection of the mind. So as soon as we project onto an ink blot in zero time, it doesn't even take 1 or 2 seconds. It's instantaneous. As soon as you project onto the ink blot shapeshifts and reflects back your projection. And so it's because of that, of the instantaneous sort of reflex of that ink blot to reflect back what we're imagining is there, that we become entranced in via our projections. And so the thing I'm saying is that, and it's not like I'm saying anything new. I'm just a translator. So many traditions, these spiritual traditions, have been saying the same thing for centuries. All that I'm pointing at is that when you see through that process, you all of a sudden access the part of you that instead of just being a passive victim to circumstances, you actually realize, wait a second, I'm a co-creator with the universe.
So you're talking about quantum level work here, aren't you?
Oh, totally. And actually, I just wrote a new book all about quantum physics, because quantum physics is the physics of the dream. It's exactly that, because what quantum physics has discovered, and it's amazing that not more people, because I think a lot of people understand, it's something amazing, but they don't quite understand what is so amazing about quantum physics. Well, they've empirically shown beyond the slightest shadow of a doubt that to even talk about an objective world makes no sense. There's nothing objective outside of us. I guess one way of saying that is that the act of observing this world actually invokes the very world we're observing. The observer is the observed. Now, what I just described, that's exactly like a dream. If you change your perspective in a dream, instantaneously that dream will reflect back your change in perspective. And the thing I'm saying is that, but that's the nature of the waking dream. That's the nature of our experience. And it's like we've been put under a spell of our own making. it's not like there's any evil entity outside of ourselves that's doing it to us. We're doing it to ourselves. We've hypnotized ourselves. That's Wetiko. And what I'm pointing at is, when you see that, you can actually break that spell.
It's amazing. Are you familiar with the Mandela effect?
It sounds familiar, but not really. So please enlighten me.
Oh, no, that's okay. I want to stick on your subject. I just wondered if this was like the Mandela effect. So let's dig in. Would you talk to me about group narcissism?
Yeah, no, totally. So what will happen, the thing about Wetiko, it's a collective psychosis, okay? Because it's a big mistake. It feeds off of polarization. So if we think, that person has Wetiko and I don't, well, guess what? If you're holding that viewpoint, you've fallen under the thrall of the bug. So the whole point is that it works through the unconscious and it's contagious. So when somebody is unwittingly being an instrument for Wetiko, and if we don't have the recognition of, okay, they're channeling something dark and they're reflecting that same evil that's in myself. So all of a sudden, you've cut through the separation. If you don't see that, and if you actually, aren't able to perceive, they're, something shadowy is coming through them, and you're in support of them, because it's hooked into a part of your unconscious that has the same vibration of that shadow. All of a sudden, then, you're unwittingly supporting them in their madness. And the part of you that's doing that is the part of you that's mad. That's the narcissistic part of all of us. So the thing about Wetiko, it can only really propagate itself through groups, through collectivities. So it's kind of important to understand, like in your intro, what you were talking about is, we're having a collective madness. Well, yeah, Wetiko is a collective psychosis. There's a psychic epidemic, and it's so pervasive that hardly anybody's even talking about it.
It's kind of scary, isn't it? So how is it we can't see through this Wetiko illusion?
Yeah, well, the thing is, and that's such a great question, because the very instrument that we use to investigate it, i.e. the psyche, is the very instrument through which it operates. And if we don't see that, then, it's hiding. Like, so as an example, if we think, I'm going to heal Wetiko, I'm going to shed light on darkness. Well, by that point of view, you're investing reality into evil and into darkness, and all of a sudden it has like some sort of power that you've given it. But if you say, no, I'm not going to put my attention on Wetiko, well, then it'll destroy you. So you see, it puts us in a dilemma, in a double bind, but that's pointing at something. And, I wrote a whole book about what it's pointing at, because encoded in Wetiko is this blessing. It contains its own medicine. It's helping us to wake up. But if we don't see that, we're going to continue to destroy ourselves. So it's a total quantum phenomena. It's a superposition of states. It has the deepest evil and the highest, light in it, encoded in it, and how it manifests depends on how we observe it.
We're going to have to take a break, Paul. Paul and I will return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Previous broadcasts of thought-provoking episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. We will be back, so don't you go away.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, High Tech with Corey Kay, and every minute of the 24/7, 365 programming of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 712-432-9459, courtesy of TalkStream Live. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 712-432-9459 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 712-432-9459 for the best of paranormal, new age, thought-provoking, sci-fi radio programming 24/7, 365.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we'll weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic right here on the Mutual Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
I am Dr. Carl O. Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Paul Levy. His latest book, Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil. His website is www.awakeninthedream.com. Paul, we were talking about how Wetiko is, it seems to be, from what you're saying, a state of polarization. We're either looking at really, really good or really, really bad with no place in between, and it's that gap in between that Wetiko operates through. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I would say that's really an accurate statement in the sense that it feeds off of, by feeding off of polarization, one other way of saying that is that we then think that we're separate from other people. So as soon as there's other, then there's fear. And then that becomes like this feedback loop that just feeds on itself. And when you take a look at what's happening in the body politic, fear is just getting inflamed all over the place. And,
well, it's pretty scary out there. I'll give it that.
Yeah, no, totally. And the thing is, but then if we react out of fear, you see, because the thing about Wetiko, it's not just in this localized way. It's non-local, which is a physics term that has to do with it transcends the third dimensional sort of space-time law. So the idea being, that what we're seeing out there, like the evil out there, it guaranteed it's coextensive with what's inside of our mind. So if we see the real scary stuff out there, and if we then react out of being afraid, then we're actually unwittingly being instruments for Wetiko. We're feeding the disease through our reactions, okay? So that's important because that's pointing at how it propagates itself through the field, through our unconscious, like not being able to really just see the evil and have the recognition that it's a reflection of something in us.
Got it. You seem to have a pretty darn good grasp of physics. Do you have a background in it?
No, I have no background in physics whatsoever as far as academically, but I've been studying physics, for 35 years, and my best friend is a quantum physicist, so we just have spent hours and hours, for years just contemplating the nature of what physics is pointing at, And it's because of that I wrote this new book. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And actually, could I just say one thing about Wetiko that's so amazing? Probably the most amazing thing about it. So its origin is the psyche, and yet it actually explicates itself through the medium of the outside world in a synchronistic way. And what that means is that whatever's going on inside of our minds, somehow what Wetiko does, it'll just not be contained within that boundary of the inner and the outer where they're separate, but it's an inner disease of the soul that will actually somehow extend itself out into the world and configure actual events in the world to synchronistically express itself. And that's just like a dream. Okay? So it's because of that I point that when you see the dreamlike nature, when you see that this world is speaking symbolically and it's synchronistic in nature, that's when you're beginning to see Wetiko.
Got it. So would you explain about the gap between the conscious and the unconscious?
Yeah, well, the thing about that gap, it's an interesting place because one ends where the other begins, okay? So it's not like there's like a gap in between them. It's like right where the unconscious stops, that's where the conscious begins. And it's that boundary is very, very permeable. So for people who have like a compartmentalization in their mind and they're disassociated in certain ways, that there's like this hard edge between the conscious and the unconscious. But the whole point is to make it so that boundary is really permeable so that the unconscious is able to communicate with us, not only in our dreams, but all throughout our day. And that they both kind of like inform each other. The unconscious and the conscious kind of help each other. And, the whole point is that they begin to develop a real sort of dialogue and have a relationship.
So how does this gap between the two, such as it is, relate to denial?
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is that the thing about denial, it's like when we are in denial, part of being in denial is that we're in denial that we're in denial. So it's this infinite regress. And it's an infinite regress that just self-perpetuates itself. And the one thing a person who's really absorbed in that process, the one thing they can't do is to actually see how they're in denial, or it would blow their whole gig. And, it's very traumatic. It's very shattering to their sense of self. So there's like a counter incentive that's built into the dynamic of denial that ensures that it just continues to propagate itself. And it's because of that when we meet people who are in denial, and we could be like giving them all the evidence and the facts that is needed to pop them out of their denial, but if they don't have the strength to look at that, they're going to just integrate that evidence in a perverse way that's going to reinforce their denial.
Got it. I mean, I've experienced, if you push, it's not nice to tug on a person's blanket. If you push too hard on a person's denials prematurely, they'll attack you rather than face what they can't look at. Have you experienced that?
Oh, totally. They can even get violent energetically, and I mean, that's where in Buddhism they'll talk about you have to have like the skillful means. Because, for example, if I see somebody in denial or in their unconscious, well, it's a non-local energy, that unconscious, so I'm going to be then triggered. And if I react out of my being triggered, I want to enlighten them, and maybe my agenda is, if they really become conscious, then I'll feel safer. Well, by us reacting out of our trigger, we're just, putting fuel on the fire of Wetiko. Okay.
Got it, because we're projecting back on the person that's projecting on us, and pretty soon we're going round and round in that feedback loop you talked about. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's why, psychologically speaking, one way that I describe Wetiko, when we're not owning our shadow and we project out our shadow. I mean, one great way of understanding this, in a dream. If you're in a dream and if you project out your own darkness, well, what is the dream how is it gonna manifest? Into the dream will walk somebody who's embodying your split off shadow. And all of a sudden, when you see them seemingly outside of yourselves, you now have evidence. Oh, the evil is out there. So then you become even more fixed in your viewpoint of projecting the shadow out there. And of course, they're doing the same thing to you. And then what happens as you amplify that process, when we see the evil out there and somebody's carrying our evil, and then we become convinced of that, then we want to destroy that evil out there, because that's a reflection of our inner process of wanting to disassociate and destroy our own darkness. And by trying to destroy the evil out there, we become possessed by the very evil we're trying to destroy, and that's Wetiko in a nutshell. And that's the psychological explanation of it.
Sounds like one very large modern mess. So do you have a background in psychology, or how do you come up with all this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have any background in psychology, and yet I have, psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists who study with me. And how I came up with this, I had a huge spiritual awakening in 1981 that was a result of intense trauma from my father, who, unbeknownst to me, was an instrument for Wetiko and played it out, and I was the only child, so I was really the recipient of his abuse. And just in real succinct form, it created enormous suffering for me. I went into my own mind trying to figure out what was going on, and I had this huge awakening. And, one way of describing that is that I was realizing, oh my God, we're having a collective shared dream. This is a mass shared dream. And in the early stages, I was so enthusiastic and excited, I got myself thrown in mental hospitals. This is in 81 to 82, probably like 4 or 5 times. And the whole while I was having a life-transforming spiritual awakening. So I was lucky in that I was able to extricate myself from the whole psychiatric scene pretty quick. I mean, it almost killed me. And then I just continued my awakening, and I was lucky enough to find my teachers and all that. So I don't have a typical academic background.
But you have a lot of academics in your background, I take it.
Oh, yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're talking about Wetiko, it's a Native American, which tribe is it from, and how did you learn about it?
Yeah, okay, so it's in Algonquin, like they have, it's like the Cree Indians are the ones that use it. Also, another term is Wendigo is sort of a synonym for Wetiko. And there's a book that I found that was describing Wetiko, and it was using that word, and it was by a Native American scholar. And as he was describing it, I had just written my book on the madness of George Bush, and I was realizing, oh my God, this is absolutely a precise description of what I was pointing at of the madness, of the madness that was coming through Bush. And what I was pointing at in that was that he was a reflection of our own madness. We dreamed up George Bush as a figure in our collective dream to embody our own psychosis. And this book that I had found on Wetiko, it was describing exactly the same thing, but through the idiom of being sort of this Native American.
Interesting. So you say that in many cases, the Wetiko disease is that the unconscious and the conscious actually trade places. Hey, you're going to have to take me along on that one.
Yeah, well, what will happen, you see, the thing about Wetiko, it's an archetypal energy. It's this daimonic energy. And by definition, a daimonic energy can possess the ego. It can take over a person. And so when that happens, the person's subjective experience is that, oh, I've never felt more myself. And yet the unconscious is in the driver's seat. And they're just an instrument for this daimonic energy to act itself out through them. But interestingly, when you look at, what the word, like the etymology of that word is like the guiding spirit. So encoded in the daimonic is the guiding spirit, is our higher self. But if we don't actually see that and we become possessed by it and taken over, then it becomes demonic. It becomes like this evil spirit. And yet, encoded in that same energy is our angel, is our guiding spirit.
Interesting. So, which is which, the conscious or the unconscious? Which one holds the guiding spirit?
Well, the thing is, it's in the collective, it's in our psyche is the guiding spirit. But what I'm pointing at is that when we get unconsciously possessed by this energy, by the Wetiko energy, by this archetypal, this daimonic energy, then we become taken over by the unconscious in a way that we're actually dreaming in our life, but we don't know we're dreaming. And that's very different than when we actually develop relationship with that daimon, and all of a sudden it informs us and it guides us and it helps us. Then in that relationship, all of a sudden what once seemed to be evil, it actually manifests as our helper, as our guiding spirit, as our angel.
Oh, kind of a coyote kind of thing we got going. Paul, you and I are going to have to take another break. Paul and I will be back on the flip side of this commercial break. You're listening to The Science of Magic on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to previous transformative broadcasts on our website for free, www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money in abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, High Tech with Corey Kay, and every minute of the 24/7, 365 programming of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 712-432-9459, courtesy of TalkStream Live. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 712-432-9459 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 712-432-9459 for the best of paranormal, new age, thought-provoking, sci-fi radio programming 24/7, 365.
Coming soon to the X-Zone Broadcast Network is A Different Perspective with me, Kevin Randall, as your host. We'll be taking a close look at what is happening in the world of UFOs today with side trips into the paranormal. Guests will range from those who are household names to those who have a different perspective on a variety of topics. No topic will be taboo, but there will be tough questions asked as we all search for the truth about UFOs, the paranormal, and those things that excite us. Sometimes we'll agree with a guest and sometimes we won't, but we'll try to keep the program topical. For those of you who like to read, be sure to visit www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com and remember to listen to the other fine programs on the X Zone Broadcast Network at www.xzbn.net. This is Kevin Randle. For nearly 30 years, I have been investigating the case of the Roswell UFO. I have interviewed hundreds of people and stood on the crash site. Now in Roswell in the 21st century, I have reviewed dozens of hours of audio and videotaped interviews, examined hundreds of files that relate to the crash, and have returned to Roswell in an attempt to put all that information into the proper perspective. For the first time in Roswell in the 21st century, I have made a dispassionate reevaluation of all that material and provide a new look at what happened. This is a book that clears away all the clutter that has hidden the truth for so long, strips away the various lies that surround the case, exposes the Air Force attempts at cover-up, and found a core of solid information that tells us all where the case stands today. Roswell in the 21st century will be available in just a few weeks. For more information, please visit my website at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com.
What Happened in Benghazi is revealed by Nicholas Genix, author of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. He informs the American people that President Obama deceived them by advocating a strong foreign policy prior to the 2012 presidential election, and Hillary Clinton supported this deception. As the title infers, there is a connection between Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. Ample evidence informs Americans that Obama's early indoctrination in the Quran developed an affinity for Islam, why the Quran is the source of discontent in many countries, and why the Obama foreign policy deception led to poor military action and caused the loss of American lives in Benghazi. Genix provides 36 questions for the Select Committee on Benghazi to validate if Americans are justified to mistrust President Obama and Hillary Clinton. An overview of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi is presented on the website www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Afterlife expert Roberta Grimes was the first one to say that dying can be fun. Now her best-selling book, The Fun of Dying, is available in stores worldwide. So if you wonder whether death ends life, how it feels to die, or what heaven might be like, The Fun of Dying was written for you. And if you have always been afraid of death, or if you worry that your life has no meaning, let The Fun of Dying ease your fears and bring new meaning to your life. Nothing said in The Fun of Dying is based on the teachings of any religion. Instead, Roberta draws on evidence to explain how death happens, how it feels, and what comes next. A lot of the best death-related evidence was produced in the first half of the 20th century. When it is put together with recent discoveries, it tells a consistent and amazing story. Roberta Grimes blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Her wonderful book, The Fun of Dying, is available on Amazon and at stores worldwide wherever books are sold.
Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to the world. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is author Paul Levy. His latest book, Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil. Paul, we were talking a bit about how Wetiko has a bit of a coyote aspect to him. Would you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. Wetiko is a trickster, and Mercurius is the alchemical figure, that symbolizes this. And the thing about that figure is that it sort of encoded in that figure is simultaneous the highest divinity and the darkest evil. And it's like a quantum phenomena, just like light has encoded within it. It's either a wave or a particle, and it depends how do we observe it. It's the same thing with Wetiko. It's a trickster. It's a coyote. It's like this, it's an alchemical figure that contains the opposites encoded inside of it. And it's because of that in my book, like if there's a conclusion to the book, what I'm really pointing at is that here Wetiko is the source of the deepest evil that's informing our species. I mean, it's really at the bottom of why we're killing ourselves. I mean, because we are committing a collective suicide as a species. We're destroying the biosphere, but yet encoded in that evil is this blessing. It's actually helping us to see the dreamlike nature. So when I began to see this and I realized, oh my God, here I'm recognizing the dreamlike nature, and I wouldn't have had that experience without Wetiko. So then the question is, well, is Wetiko evil, or is it the highest good? Or are the two indistinguishable, you see? And that's in alchemy, they talk about the state where you have the opposites, bringing the opposites together. And so that's the state where you actually begin to integrate Wetiko, and it then informs your creativity.
You know, you speak, and this leads me into another question. You speak of two-valued logic and four-valued logic, and I think that fits in here. Would you mind explaining that?
Sure. No, totally. So in the West, we have been kind of under the spell of two-valued logic, where things are either true or false. But in the higher, like for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, they'll talk about four-valued logic, and a simple way of understanding that, instead of, well, is it A or B? Well, it can be A and B. So an example, like the Wetiko virus, it totally exists. It's just destroying our species, and yet it has no intrinsic objective existence whatsoever. So it both exists and it doesn't exist. And that, if we're entranced by the two-valued form of logic, that makes no sense. But from the Buddhist point of view, oh no, that makes perfect sense. So just if I can say one more thing about that. So here's Wetiko, which actually doesn't even exist, and yet it can destroy our species. Now, how can that be? Well, what I point out in the book is that because it's reflecting back our own, untapped power. And that's what it's actually, when you see it, the thing about a dream, when we're unconscious, what is a dream? It's a compensation of our unconscious. So it's bringing us back into balance. So because we're not in touch with our own power, of course we're going to dream up something like Wetiko to reflect that back. If Wetiko didn't exist, we would have to invent it. Okay?
Got it. You know, my Celtic tradition, I've studied various forms of shamanism. And in the Celtic tradition, they often say, well, it is and it isn't, when you ask a yes or no question. And that's the same kind of thing here, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's the four-valued logic, and that's the logic of the enlightened mind. And to actually begin to embrace that logic, and this is the logic in quantum physics. That's in this new quantum physics book that I've written. I point out it's the same, the idea, like, how can light be a wave, and a particle? If you say, oh, it's just a wave, no. Is it just a particle? No. It's both and.
It is and it isn't.
Yeah, it is and it isn't, exactly.
So how does two-valued logic and four-valued logic relate to polarities and duality?
Yeah, well, the thing, when there's two-valued logic, when things are either true or not true, I mean, that feeds into the polarized point of view. And like I was saying, the thing about Wetiko, I mean, it feeds off of polarization. So if we, all of a sudden, for example, if we think, oh, I exist as an isolated entity, as an ego, in my body, and then, other people are like other, then all of a sudden there's the polarization, and as soon as there's other, there's fear, and fear is like the petri dish for Wetiko to just feed itself. But the antidote to that is seeing the interconnectedness, is seeing that we're actually, interdependent, to see through the separation, and to to see that interconnectedness, and the expression of that is compassion. And that's why in my book I talk about compassion is the Wetiko dissolver par excellence.
So, do you see our current system as exploiting the gap in consciousness created by the two-valued logic? And if so, would you go into it a little?
Yeah, oh, totally. Well, our current system, our culture, with the mainstream media being the propaganda organ for the powers that be. And you see, the thing about Wetiko, if you remember, I'm saying it's an inner disease of the soul that's explicating itself through the medium of the outside world. Well, just think about what's happening in the body politic of the world. There's some sort of shadow government that's trying to centralize power and control, and that's a reflection of how Wetiko works inside of our mind. That there's if you think about Wetiko as like this cancer of the psyche, well, then what it will do, it'll subsume the healthy parts of the psyche to serve it. And it more and more just, will metastasize and colonize the psyche, centralizing power and control till it institutes a shadow government in our psyche in such a way that we then become compelled to act out against our best interest. That's an inner process that I just described happening inside the psyche. Well, I'm saying that's getting reflected back out in the greater body politic of the world. And when you begin to see that, that's when you begin to see Wetiko, and that's when you begin to wake up, and that's when you begin to all of a sudden to snap out of the spell, and because it can't stand to be seen. When you see Wetiko, it will violently react because when you see it, it takes away its power. It has no power over you then, and you then become empowered yourself. That's its worst nightmare.
Well, now that we've thoroughly scared everyone to death, how do we break the Wetiko curse?
Yeah, well, the thing is, what I point out, because it's a psychic blindness, you have to see it. And it operates through the unconscious, through our blind spots, and there are three ways of seeing it, but they're all really the same. And the first way is to recognize the dreamlike nature, like I've been talking about, where you recognize, oh, my inner process is synchronistically reflected through the outer world, that this outer world is an oracle that's speaking symbolically. Second is you begin to see, oh, there's a non-local field that's pervading and informing everything, that things that seem to be like these isolated events, there's actually some sort of deeper process or patterning that's informing everything. That's number two. Number three is to see through the idea that we're separate. And when and of course, all three of those are really just three facets of the same insight. And so when you begin to see through that, idea that we're separate and realize, oh, we're interconnected, we're interdependent, that gives birth to compassion. And then what happened to Wetiko? It's gone. It can't stand, to be around when compassion's there.
Wetiko, in other words, cannot exist in a non-polarized environment?
Yeah, right. Like I've been saying, it flourishes off of polarization. So when we actually connect with our hearts, with our true nature, and our true nature is that love, is that compassion, and that's, the same thing where Wetiko is contagious. Well, that love and compassion, as we all know, it's contagious. When we're around people who are like really open-hearted and embodying that, it opens our hearts. And so that's kind of why we can all help each other. The idea in Buddhism is the Sangha. There are three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, teacher, teaching, and a community. And the Sangha, in a way, is the most important of the three in the sense that it's the idea being, that to become awakened isn't, it's not an isolated thing, but we all, because we're interdependent, we can all help each other to wake up, and we can all reflect back who we are, and that then becomes a field that's resistant to and dispels Wetiko.
So you're basically talking about the 100th monkey theory. The more of us that wake up, the more available the awakening is?
Right. Very much so with the 100th monkey. And one beautiful image of that, when you have this bottle of like a glass of water and you take like a crystal of sugar and you just keep on dissolving one and more of the crystals of sugar, they'll just dissolve into the water. But when it reaches the saturation point, you put one more granule of sugar in that glass of water and a crystal will manifest. And that critical mass, any one of us in this moment, maybe self-reflecting or seeing our shadow or recognizing Wetiko, could be that grain of sugar that precipitates a global awakening.
That's amazing. So the crystalline form that the glass becomes, how does that analogy carry out? Does that then shine the frequency of the awakening?
Yeah, well, it's like the 100th monkey phenomena. At a certain point, when if you or me or one of our listeners at this moment, really has the recognition of the dreamlike nature, that realization gets gets registered in the collective unconscious.
Time flies, and Paul, we're out of it. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show. Our guest this hour has
totally
been
my
Paul
pleasure. Thank
Levy.
you.
His latest book, Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil. Paul's website is awakeninthedream.com. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge and comforted with love as you awaken from the dream.